Hi guys, the Metal Maniac back again. In this video, I'm going to be listing off my top 10 favorite death metal albums. Now, yes, I said I would do this next year, but that was only because up until today, I was struggling with what to pick for the list, because for a while, I already had 9 choices, and I just needed that last one, that 10th one, and it was really difficult because death metal is my second favorite genre of metal besides, traditional heavy metal. So it was really hard to pick overall. And then at one point I got to 9 picks and I just needed that last 10th pick. And it was really difficult because it was really hard to pick only 10 albums, only 10 death metal albums. So it was even harder to pick just one more because there were still so many options. So it took me up until today, and I finally I have the 10th pick now, and I could finally do this video. But yeah, so anyway, let's get straight into it. At number 10 is Eaten Back to Life by Cannibal Corpse. Now, the thing is, there are days where this is my favorite my favorite Cannibal Corpse album, and there are days where A Skeletal Domain is my favorite Cannibal Corpse album. Because I love both this and Skeletal Domain equally. Like, I love those. I love these two albums so much. I don't have the other one on hand right now. It's on my shelf, but I'm too lazy to pick it up. Anyway, it just so happens that today I prefer this over A Skeletal Domain, and maybe at some point in the future, when I do another video with these two, with this, like a Cannibal Corpse album, I'll pick up, I'll say that, A Skeletal Domain is my favorite, but, it just happens today that I prefer this one over A Skeletal Domain. Anyway, but, yeah, so, also, with this album, this is really, in my opinion, the only good Chris Barnes-era Cannibal Corpse album. Not to say that the other three don't have any good elements to them. Like, I love the musicality and the lyrics and all the gory, imagery of all 4 Chris Barnes-era Cannibal Corpse albums. But the one thing that I hate, that I really hate about the other 3 Chris Barnes era stuff, is his vocals. Like, his vocals on here, though, are really good. They're sort of the raspy growls, whereas the other 3 Chris Barnes era albums, he does these really sort of annoying, really guttural, like, not like traditional guttural, but like these almost Cookie Monster type vocals. Like, yeah, like, you would, okay, so you know how, when someone who doesn't really understand death metal, sort of tries to mimic that, they always go to, like, the Cookie Monster vocals, the rah, 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 gar, gar, gar stuff. That's basically the Chris Barnes style of vocals on the last 3 of those era of Cannibal Corpse albums. Like, where he doesn't even try to pronounce anything, he doesn't even try to put any effort into it, he's just, sort of growling, sort of just gibberish. It really seems like he wasn't really trying. Whereas this album, he put all his effort into here. He put all his effort into his vocals, and actually cared about doing a good job, instead of just slacking off. So yeah, that's the only reason why I don't like the other 3 Chris Barnes era albums, because his vocals are just so nonsensically lazy, and he doesn't even try. Whereas here he puts all his effort into it, and that's why this album is, like, stands above the other 3. But yeah, this is at number 10. Alright, number 9. Number 9 is the album, what was it again? Oh yeah, The Empires of Inhumanity by Fatal Embrace. Sorry, I always forget the title for some reason. But, this is an amazing modern era death metal album. I believe it was, doesn't say, but I believe this was, 2014. I might be wrong about that. No, 2010. Sorry, 2010. It was released in 2010, and it's one of the best modern era death metal albums. Because there's not a lot of those. Like, there's not all of the there's not a lot of good modern era death metal albums. Um, and I was actually blown away by this one because it's just so good, and I was expecting it to be, just boring, because a lot of, not just a lot of death metal, modern era death metal albums, but a lot of modern era albums in general, either have one of two problems. Either they're so overly produced because of the modern way of doing, producing an album. It just sounds too clean, too crisp, and just too manufactured. Or the other problem that always is very consistently just just a consistent problem, is the songs are just sort of, they sound boring and just sound unoriginal, and either they repeat stuff that's been done already, or they just don't try to do anything new and just sort of stay in a little safe, secure box, as it were. But here, I was blown away. Oh, sorry, wrong side. I was blown away by this because not only does this album sound unique, but each individual song has its own identity in terms of each individual song sounds different and unique as well. The production is perfect. It's not overly produced and it's not underproduced. It's in that perfect in between that a modern era death metal album should be. It's not a perfect album. There are a few songs that are pretty boring, but for the most part, it's really, really good. And also pretty underrated. I haven't found a lot of people mentioning this band, and that's sort of a shame, really, because yes, I haven't heard any of their other albums yet, but from what I've heard from this album, they're just great. They're really great, and they should have more credit than they have, because they should be known. It should be very well known. But yeah, just a really great album. Just a great death thrash band. Perfect combination of modern death metal and modern thrash metal. Yeah, that's at number 9. Number 8. Number 8 is the album The Jester Race by the band In Flames. If you've seen a lot of my other videos, you know by now I'm a huge fan of melodic death metal, especially with bands like with In Flames and Deathclock. I actually, the way I discovered death metal was through Deathclock, so the first ever kind of death metal I heard was melodic death metal. And I just love melodic death metal. It's just something that always sort of, it never gets old, it never gets boring, and it always sort of brings something new that wasn't there before, in terms of, every time I pick up an album that's a melodic death metal album, every time nothing sounds the same at all. Every album is unique, just because the way melodic death metal is in general. It just there's always something tweaked, always something different. Always a different style depending on the band. And I just love this album, and I really need to check out some of their other albums. This is their second album, I'm pretty sure. I know their first album has a completely different singer. But I can't wait to check out more of their albums, because from what I've heard on here, this album's really good. Yeah, there's a few songs on here that are pretty boring, but for the most part, this is an amazing album. But yeah, definitely an album where I'll always go back to. Definitely something I'll never get sick of. But yeah, this is at number 8, I think I'm at. Yeah, I'm at number 8. Alright, number 7. Number 7 is the album Altars of Madness by Morbid Angel. Now, out of all their albums, this is definitely my absolute favorite. There's not many Morbid Angel albums I like. I actually recently just listened to every single one of the Morbid Angel albums. With this one, I mean, I already listened to this one, and then I own this one, and then I own uh, Gateways to Annihilation. Though these two I absolutely love. Now, recently I just I went on YouTube and just sort of listened throughout all their albums, and for the most part, the rest of their albums suck. Like I really only like this one, Domination and Gateways to Annihilation. Which Domination I don't have yet, but I will because that album's amazing. But really, I only like 3 of their albums. But out of the 3, I think this is the best. Yeah, I kind of hate how they changed the cover art, but anyway, this is definitely their rawest, their most unique, and their most just sinister sounding. Like, I love the production on this album. Now this isn't really remastered or remixed that much. Like, all they did is sort of not really clean up the audio too much. They sort of just uh I don't know what exactly they did, but it doesn't sound like they tampered with it much. I guess they just sort of improved certain elements of the audio in certain places here and there on certain songs. But for the most part, it sounds pretty much like the original release, which I don't own, but I have heard what the original release sounds like, and it sounds pretty similar to it. Maybe slight, touch ups here and there. Um, Also, one of the main things I love about this album is the atmosphere. I love, like, in certain sections, there's these sort of, like, synthesizer bits where it makes it sound like a very sort of eerie, sort of almost, like, unholy choir of just, like, monstrous. I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. It's just something, like, there's synthesizers in here, but in a way to make it more atmospheric and not to distract and make it sound, just really odd. I don't know, just everything about the atmosphere, the songwriting, the singing, and the instrumentation on this album is perfect. Um, but yeah, just a really amazing album, and that's at number 7. I'm losing track of where I'm at, but yeah, when I go on these long spiels about how much I love certain albums, I kind of lose track about what number I'm at. Yeah, I'm thinking that this is at number 7. Anyway, at number 6. Now, yes, I'm kind of cheating. I'm putting an EP on this list, but it's my list. I can put an EP on here if I want. And that is the EP, Dimensions of Horror. Sorry, with newer stuff that I've recently just got, or stuff that I don't listen to that much, I can, from time to time, forget a title. But Dimensions of Horror is something I actually got pretty recently. This band, Gruesome. Gruesome is a band that they say they're, not a cover band, what is it? A tribute band to, a tribute band of, like, they're a tribute to, like, some old school death metal bands, including Obituary, I think Morbid Angel, and Death and Possessed. Even though, in my opinion, Possessed is more of black and thrash metal, not really death metal. But yeah, you could kind of hear on this album their influences of those bands. Like, with the song Forces of Death, it really sounds like something that would be off of the Possessed album, Seven Churches. Right by Darkness kind of also sounds like a Possessed song. Amputation kind of sounds like Obituary. Hellbound and Seven Doors sound somewhat like Morbid Angel songs. And then Dimensions of Horror. Dimensions of Horror, the title track, like, has a clear influence of the song Evil Dead by Death. And of course, Evil Dead is my favorite Death song, and Death is my favorite death metal band, so of course I love this song. More particularly, the parts of the song, Dimensions of Horror, that sound very much like Evil Dead, are the very beginning of the song and the very end of the song. But it's overall, it's a fantastic EP. and I can't wait to listen to more of their stuff because this is just an amazing thing. Yes, it's a modern release, but they do an amazing job capturing the feel of old school death metal. Like, I don't think many other bands can pull that off. Like, especially newer bands, like considering that, with everything, modern recording techniques and just the way the modern style of death metal is, a lot of bands can't really pull off the feel of old school death metal or the style of it either. But Gruesome is one of those bands from, this era, this modern era, that can really pull off that old school death metal feel and style to perfection. Um, but yeah, I just love this EP, and that's at number what? Yeah, I'm at number 4. All right. No, I'm at number 5. Sorry, that was number 5, not number 4. All right, now I'm at number 4. Oh, no. I am so off. I was at number 6. I'm so sorry about that. I kind of lost track again. Anyway, now I'm at number 5. 5, yeah, sorry. I completely lost track. Again, I go on these long tangents about how much I love an album and completely forget what number I'm at in terms of a top 10. Alright, this is at number 6, I believe. Nope, number 5. See, I completely forget. But yeah, anyway, at number 5 is another EP. Again, I'm kind of cheating, but again, this is my list, and that is the EP "My Dark Subconscious" by the band Morbid. Now I do own the standard release. If I could get it out here, hold on. Oh no, December Moon. I'm sorry, it's December Moon. My Dark Subconscious was the single. Or I guess it was the original title. I don't know. I think it was either the original title or it was a single. But it's December Moon. I am so sorry about that. I don't know why. I thought it was I thought one of the songs was a title track. I'm all over the place today. But yeah. December Moon. I have the standard version, which I believe is a bootleg, actually. And then I have an official release, which is this compilation album. But now I'm not talking about the compilation album. I'm talking about the actual EP, the 4-track EP. Now, December Moon is an EP that is very odd because there are so many different versions, and only like 2 versions are actually legit. There's so many bootleg versions out there, like the one I just showed you. And the original release, the original official release, was only ever on vinyl, and it's actually pretty hard to find. I wouldn't say as hard as something like this, which is actually a pretty recent release. And again, it's an official release by I believe one of the companies that owns the rights to the music. But yes, Century Media. So this is an official release again by a company that owns the rights to the music or bought out the rights or something. I know they have the rights to the music, but it's an official release, one of only 2. But yeah, so the EP December Moon, or it says it's a demo, but considering that it has 4 tracks and everyone calls it an EP and not a demo, I'm gonna say it's an EP. Now, my initial first listen, I liked all but the last track, Disgusting Simila. But now I absolutely love it, and I love the entirety of the EP. It's just something very unique that you don't really hear that often, especially with it's still with stuff nowadays. But even back then, this is something that you didn't hear that often. Something so unique and so just dark and sinister sounding. Yeah, I mean, I guess black metal stuff, but this EP, well, it has elements of old school black metal, it also has elements of old school death metal and old school thrash metal as well. So it's like a combination of a couple different styles of metal. So I think that's the reason why I like it. Yes, I don't like much black metal, even though black metal is one of my favorite genres. There's not even it's weird because black metal is one of my favorite genres, but it's not something I like a lot of stuff from. I'm very picky about what I like from it. For I don't know, I just am. But this thing I like because it infuses a couple different genres together to make something extremely unique. And Dead's vocals on here compared to what he did with Mayhem sound even more unique than what he did with Mayhem because it just everything about this EP is so unique to the point where it's just awesome. Like I love Dead's sort of snake-like raspy vocals on here. I love the production. It's very old school and very low budget without being terrible. And you guys know what I mean. There are low budget productions of like albums and stuff like that that are so low budget that they're terrible. But then there are ones that are low budget but kind of actually fit and work very well with the actual music. And that's kind of what's with this is that it's low budget, it works well. Um, Other than say like the live recordings of Live at the Ultra in November and Live at the Ultra in April, which are just so low budget, they're terrible. But everything else on here, I am getting way off track. I'm talking about the EP, not the rest of the stuff. But the EP is just something that is so good yet so forgotten about that not a lot of people, realize it exists. Same thing with the band as a whole. Not a lot of people realize that Morbid was an actual band and that they existed. Well, when I talk to people about Morbid, I don't, whenever I do, I don't often because not a lot of people know about this band. But from what I've talked about to certain people, they were like, I've never heard of this band before, because they weren't very well known. But I am going on and on about this. I'm so sorry. I better move on to the next one. But yeah, this is at number 5, December Moon. Anyway, number 4. Number 4 is the album, the Death Album 3 by Death Clock. The very first true metal album I ever heard. Because before this, I heard, one or two glam metal albums that I didn't even know was whatever. I didn't know about the genre of metal, so I thought they were, hard rock or something. But, this is really the first album that I knew what metal was, and the first, proper metal album I was ever introduced to. And this is the thing that introduced me to the TV show Metalocalypse, which is now now is my favorite. I don't know why I said one of. It is my favorite TV show of all time. I own all 4 seasons on DVD, by the way. It's one of those shows that I had to actually get because it's just so good. Anyway, back to the Death Album 3. The Death Album 3, out of all 3 Death Clock albums, is the best in terms of everything. It has the best vocal performance, it has the best musicality, it has the best production, it has just everything that they could do right, they did right on this album. I love majority of the songs on this album. Yes, there's only one song that I think is weak, and that's Sky Hunter. But even then, with that being a weak song, it's not a bad song. It's still a great song. It's just, it can't quite compare to everything else on the album. But yeah, it just has some of the best instrumentation I've heard on any modern era metal release. And I absolutely love it. Is that number 4? Anyway, at number 3 is the album Death Revenge by the band Exhumed. Again, another amazing modern era death metal release. It's one that I was really surprised about because I had no idea what I was in for because I hadn't heard any of their songs or anything before listening to this. I bought this on a whim. I just looked at the cover art and was like, Okay, this seems good. I'm gonna try it out. So I bought this, listened to it, and was amazed. And I was even more amazed to find out this is a concept album, a death metal concept album. You don't really see those that often, or pretty much at all, except for this. Um, at least from what I've known, haven't really come across any other death metal concept album. Um, Now they mix a couple different styles together. They mix old school death metal and more of the modern melodic death metal, which is awesome. And then they mix two different old school death metal style of vocals. They mix together the very low, almost Chris Barnes kind of growls, which I don't really enjoy on their own, but I enjoy them on this album because they're paired with the more raspy old school death metal vocals, and those two kinds of vocals working side by side are a very good combination, a very awesome combination that I absolutely love. Um, I love the concept of the concept album. Basically, it sort of recounts the true story of the grave robbing slash murder slash black market thing going on in the that went on in the sort of time period of like what the 1800s in Scotland, where two brothers were grave diggers, and they basically started figuring, they can make more money off of actually killing people and selling their bodies to, the medical schools for, putting them as the bodies as cadavers that they could study. And because they weren't really making any money from grave robbing at that point in time, so they came up with a really sort of psychopathic idea, which actually made them a lot of money. But pretty crazy. Um, so yeah, the musicality is great. I love the mix of different styles of death metal, and the overall duo combination of death metal vocals is just genius. So overall, a really amazing modern era death metal album, and one of the best concept albums ever. Um, but yeah, that's at number 3. Um, at number 2. Number 2 is the album From Beyond by Massacre, which I actually recently got this on vinyl, which is over there somewhere. But this album, is one of the most unique old school death metal albums I've ever heard, because it is one of, if not the best, to mix thrash and death. This was, even though it was released in 91, a lot of it was recorded way early on in I think the late 80s, I believe. Either mid to late 80s, and even though a lot of it was recorded back then, it wasn't put together as an actual full-length album until later on in the very early 90s and released in 91. So I think it was put together around 89-ish and then released. It was released in 91. So even though by that time in 91, death metal was, sort of your traditional old school death metal, the sound you would expect, this kind of has sort of still that really thrashy type nature to the songs. So it does have those really catchy thrash metal riffs paired with the death metal vocals and the overall production of death metal and the heaviness to it. And that's the reason why I like a lot of the really, really early death metal albums, because they still had sort of that thrash metal nature to it. So it was a combination of, the brutal grittiness of death metal with the very catchy thrash metal riffs to them. Just a really underrated album. Yeah, not a lot of people, mention this album or talk about this album or anything, because, it just gets overlooked because of the time period it came out. It was, not up-to-date death metal. It was, stuff that was recorded a few years before, and, up to most people, it was out of date and not the right style that they wanted at the time. But yeah, really amazing death metal album. highly recommended. At number 2. And at number 1, hold on, let me put this back really quick. At number 1 is the legendary death metal album by the band Death, Scream Bloody Gore. My all-time favorite death metal album. It has everything you could want in terms of old school death metal. Really high shrieks paired with raspy gutturals, a really sort of raw, untamed production, and just really catchy, almost thrashy death metal riffs that pair the thrash style and the heaviness of the death metal style perfectly. The songwriting is very, intricate without being overly done. The lyrics are really awesomely gory and gritty. But and then Chuck himself, the mastermind behind the band, is, in my opinion, at his best in terms of both the vocals and the songwriting. Maybe not the songwriting, but definitely the vocals. Or at least the songwriting in terms of the earlier albums, maybe. But all in all, my favorite death metal album from my favorite death metal band. Yeah, that's at number 1. Alright. Now, sorry this video was a bit long. It's like 31 minutes. I'm so sorry it took so long. I went on so many different rants, on so many different, just rants about how much I love all these albums, which probably will happen from time to time in these top 10s. But yeah, so thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. I will see you next time.